So I want to talk about thoughts turning to things. I, like Esther, had a pretty fast manifestation of that. I spent about 15 minutes focusing on one of my clients. I found out that his daughter was abducted, raped, and killed. And so there was a lot of focus on negative feeling, of feeling powerlessness, that somebody that you love could be taken from you, that this is a terrible thing. And within hours, I got a call from my husband's sister saying, I know you don't watch the news, but I'm really concerned about your husband. And there were 2 Navy vessels that were captured right where he is and where he's been and where he's presently at. We can't get a hold of him. So have you talked to him recently? And I said, yeah, I talked to him this morning, and I think he's good. I feel really good that all is well. But then as they started to talk and reiterate that they were worried and they couldn't get a hold of him, just wanting me to reassure them, I started to wobble. And I started to go there where I had experienced earlier in the morning of that feeling like, oh, what if that's a possibility? And what if he was captured? And what if, and so I went there very briefly, and I caught myself really quickly. And I thought, okay, I knew so strongly that he was okay and that he was probably asleep in his bed. And I tried to get a hold of him and I couldn't. And I thought, okay, so what can you do to just try to get in the receptive mode? And so I cleaned my tile floors with a toothbrush because
Because that's so much fun.
Yeah. Well, I did get in the receptive mode because it gave me the idea, because I started to think about my dogs. I started to pet my dogs, and I started to play with them. And then I had the impulse to clean the tile floors because I immediately saw that if I could just be present, and I listened to you, our Alaska cruise, I listened to that again. If I could just be present and focus on what I was doing, then I couldn't think about that other thing. I could get off at the next stop and choose another train. And so I did that for like 4.5 hours, and it really worked, and I felt really good, and I felt really sure, and I felt so good knowing that he was okay and that he was fine. But after he finally woke up and he called me and he said, I'm okay, and he knew what was going on, and he said they're going to be fine and they're going to get released and all is well. About 30 minutes later, I finished cleaning the tile floors because I wasn't quite done yet, and I had that strong epiphany from last weekend. Abraham, you talked a lot about turning thoughts to things. And I thought, wow, oh my goodness, turning thoughts to things. What thoughts were I thinking that led to that? And it was that super important knowing of how those thoughts that I had earlier in the morning turned to that thing. And it was really empowering because even though it was something leaning towards what I don't want, I was able to catch it in the early stages.
We like the story, and we like the experience that you have, and we like that you were able to turn it around. And yet we still want to say this really important thing. And that is that if the work that you do, and you have been doing, if the work that you do is out in advance, getting out ahead of it, in other words, it feels really important to think thoughts that feel good when you feel that you're in the middle of a crisis where you're trying to prevent something from, in other words, and when the chips are down, the stakes are high, the risk is great, in other words, and it takes a very focused person to hold themselves in a good vibrational state under those conditions. Good for you that you were able to do that. But still, we don't want to give you a badge or a reward or an award for being able to focus when the chips are down, because that's not when the majority of the good work really is done. The good work that you've been doing made it possible for you to move comfortably through something that could have been a very unpleasant period of time, and that's really a wonderful thing. But we really want to emphasize that it's not these big things that come up that you focus correctly or incorrectly about that are making the difference. It's the day-to-day choices about being in the receptive mode that really make the difference in the way your life is unfolding. And so many of the things that you worry about are not at the point where they're ready to become a thing. In other words, there's this lovely balance in all things. Thoughts are becoming things, but we want your emphasis to be upon the thought that you're thinking, not the thing that's becoming. Can you feel that? Yeah. Because if you can let your work be upon the thought that you're thinking feels this way, because you're allowing yourself to think this thought with your inner being. That's really what we're getting at. We want you to be willing to think the thought that your inner being will be thinking with you, because that's when you're most alive, rather than caring about the thing that the thought is turning to. There's a really big distinction there, isn't there?
Yes. That's
A
so
really
good.
big distinction.
And so I love that you said that, because in the morning I didn't do my morning work. I kind of had been rushed. I had new flooring coming in, and I didn't meditate, and I didn't do my morning practice. And so it was really clear to me at the end of the night, and just thinking thoughts turned to things, and like, what vibration was I in when I got that news? And it was the same thing. I was a little frazzled. I was already starting momentum going in that direction. So morning practice is so important, starting off the day and really
In
getting
some
in the
ways,
receptive
the
mode.
conversation that we are having, we run the risk, and we use those words deliberately and softly, of making you afraid of your thoughts and afraid of your words. In other words, we've been there with you a few years ago where we were teaching you to be the deliberate creator of your own experience, and you began saying, cancel, cancel, trying to suck your thoughts back before law of attraction gets hold of them and screws up your life. And we don't want you to feel like that about your thoughts, because every thought is moldable and manageable, and we want you to focus upon the resources of source energy that are at your back, the resources of well-being that are there, and the absolute, not just likelihood, certainty of it always turning out right for you. Yes. No matter what, no matter how it looks at any point in time. Yeah. Because that's who you are. In other words, but you all would have to step back and look at the bigger picture in order for this statement that we've just made to be meaningful or to even be accepted by you. Because we know that sometimes you're walking through time, and sometimes things do happen that you want to call awful and that you don't want to happen, and you want to say, Abraham, sometimes bad things do happen to some people. And we want to say, we get what you're saying. But when you step back and acknowledge that everything is about the becoming of you, and in any point in time you are allowing yourself, in your brilliant words and in the brilliant words of what just came before, when you allow yourself to be the total you that you really are, then you really understand that.
That's so good, because I had a beautiful reading from it, and messages from Margaret Angel, and she told me this, gave me this, what you just said, that my whole life purpose is about helping people find home within themselves. And when she told me I've been getting dreams and nudges to write a book, and she said, oh, it was so good. She just said, everything of being in service of pet rescue and as a dolphin trainer and real estate, it's all been about helping people be at home with themselves. And that lit me up so big and so good. And when you said earlier about the writing of the book, because that scares me, I'm just like, what in the world? But the desire, the impulse to do it when I'm in the receptive mode is so strong. And when you said it's like your advice would be just to write about the now and like the everyday thing, it felt so good. They had given me the inspiration to do a blog, which I hadn't thought about, but when they said it, it felt so good, because it's an everyday thing to help people and to give them processes and advice that I have already in me.
Here's the best way of approaching all of this. When you're in the receptive mode, receive
Magic.
And blog. When you're in the receptive mode, find any outlet to express it that you can. That receptive mode is so delicious, because it's just one thing leading to another, leading to another, leading to another, leading to another. And the universe will bring to you others who are receptive to what you are presenting. Yeah. There's a distinction between rescuing, because no one ever rescues from the receptive mode. No one ever rescues from the receptive mode, because when you're rescuing, you're focused upon something that doesn't allow the receptive mode. Sure. And so as you focus upon being in the receptive mode and then just follow the impulses that come from that practice state of being, like you've demonstrated here in this intense example that you presented, then all is well. Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
And by all is well, what we mean is living happily ever after. Yes. We're not talking about outcomes. We're not talking about down the road. We're talking happily now, happily ever after. Now and now and now and now and now. Happy now and now and happy now and now. And happy meaning interested, fascinated, loving, appreciative. Happy means a lot of things, doesn't it? Okay. Sometimes you're happy just to slow down and rest. Sometimes you're happy just to put your feet in the water. Sometimes you're happy just to eat something delicious. Sometimes you're happy to engage with another person. In other words, happiness is a really broad thing. But when we say happy, we mean receptive mode. We mean you and you having this moment. We think this is a really good time for a segment of refreshment.
Thank you.